The anonymous phone call came in at 2:47 p.m. There's a bomb on Flight 447 to Chicago. And suddenly, Denver International Airport had 30 minutes to find a device that could kill 180 passengers. While TSA supervisors panicked and the FBI was still en route, the quiet security guard at Gate B12 immediately began bomb detection procedures that revealed he wasn't just checking IDs. He was a former Army EOD specialist who had spent 8 years defusing explosives in the world's most dangerous war zones. The afternoon sun streamed through the massive windows of Denver International Airport as TSA officer James Mitchell completed another routine security screening at Gate B12. It was 2:45 p.m. on a Thursday, and the usual controlled chaos of air travel surrounded him. Business travelers rushing to catch connections, families herding children through security lines, and the constant background hum of announcements echoing through the terminal. James had been working airport security for 5 years now, and at 35 years old, he'd settled into the rhythm of the job with quiet professionalism. Standing just over 6 feet tall with close-cropped brown hair and alert brown eyes, he wore his TSA uniform with the same attention to detail he'd once applied to military dress standards. To the thousands of passengers who passed through his checkpoint each week, James was simply another face in the security process, polite, efficient, and forgettable. What they didn't know was that James's methodical approach to screening passengers and his uncanny ability to spot potential threats came from 8 years as an Army explosive ordnance disposal specialist, including 4 combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, where finding hidden bombs was literally a matter of life and death. When James had left the military 3 years ago, the transition to civilian life had been more difficult than disarming improvised explosive devices in hostile territory. After spending his 20s crawling through tunnels to defuse IEDs and conducting controlled detonations of enemy ordnance, the prospect of a normal job felt both appealing and terrifying. TSA work had offered him something he needed, a way to continue protecting people from threats, even if those threats were different from the ones he'd faced in combat. The work wasn't glamorous. Most days involved checking identification, operating X-ray machines, and conducting pat-downs of passengers who'd triggered metal detectors. But James had found unexpected satisfaction in the routine. He was still protecting people, still using his training to keep threats away from innocent civilians, and still serving his country in a way that mattered. This particular Thursday had been routine until his radio crackled with the transmission that would change everything. All TSA personnel, this is Airport Operations Center. We have received a credible bomb threat against Flight 447, United Airlines service to Chicago O'Hare. Scheduled departure 3:30 p.m. from Gate B12. Initiating Code Red protocol immediately. FBI and bomb squad are en route. ETA 25 minutes. James felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had once accompanied mission briefings in Baghdad. Code Red meant an active bomb threat, the scenario that every airport security officer trained for but hoped they'd never face. Flight 447 was right here at his gate, currently boarding passengers for departure in 45 minutes. Around him, the other TSA officers began following standard protocol, stopping all screening operations, securing the immediate area, and preparing to evacuate the gate. But James's mind was already shifting into a different mode entirely. The tactical mindset that had kept him alive during 127 bomb disposal operations in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. His supervisor, Linda Martinez, approached with obvious stress. "James, we need to clear this entire area and wait for the bomb squad. Can you help coordinate passenger evacuation?" "Linda," James said, his voice carrying a calm authority that surprised her. "Before we evacuate, I need to know more about the threat. What exactly did the caller say? Did they specify location, type of device, timing?" Linda looked at him with confusion. "James, that's not our job. We just secure the area and let the experts handle it." What Linda didn't know was that she was looking at an expert. James had handled more bomb threats and explosive devices than most FBI agents would see in their entire careers. His EOD training had taught him that information gathering was often more critical than evacuation procedures, especially when dealing with credible threats against aircraft. "I understand protocol," James replied. "But if there really is a bomb on that plane, we might not have time to wait for backup. Can you get me the exact wording of the threat?" Linda hesitated, then spoke into her radio. "Airport Ops, this is Gate B12 Supervisor. We need the exact transcript of the bomb threat call for our response team." The response came back within 30 seconds. Caller stated, "There is a bomb on United Flight 447 to Chicago. It will detonate when the plane reaches cruising altitude. You have less than an hour to find it." Call lasted 12 seconds. Male voice, background noise suggested airport environment. James processed this information with the systematic approach he'd learned during EOD training. Bomb threats came in several categories: hoaxes designed to disrupt operations, legitimate warnings from people who discovered devices, and tactical deceptions meant to control emergency response. The specificity of this threat, flight number, detonation trigger, timeline, suggested either a hoax by someone with detailed knowledge or a genuine threat. "Linda, I need to make a recommendation that's going to sound unusual," James said. "Instead of evacuating the gate area, we should evacuate the aircraft and conduct an immediate search. If there's really a device on board, we need to find it before departure, not after." "James, that's not our call to make. The bomb squad will handle the search when they arrive." "The bomb squad is 20 minutes out," James replied. "If the caller is telling the truth, and if that plane takes off on schedule, we could have 180 people in the air with an explosive device. I have experience with this kind of situation." Linda studied James with new attention. In 5 years of working together, she'd never seen him take charge of a situation like this. His calm confidence and tactical thinking suggested training that went far beyond standard TSA procedures. "What kind of experience?" she asked. James hesitated. For 5 years, he'd deflected questions about his background, giving vague answers about previous security work and avoiding discussions of his military service. But with 180 lives potentially at stake and the clock ticking, personal privacy seemed less important than public safety. "Army EOD," he said simply. "Explosive ordnance disposal. 8 years, 4 combat deployments. I've handled this exact scenario before, just in different environments." Linda's eyes widened. "Your bomb disposal?" "Was bomb disposal. Look, I'm not trying to take over or circumvent protocol, but if there's really a device on that aircraft, every minute counts. The caller mentioned cruising altitude as the trigger, which means it's probably either a barometric device or a timer set for typical flight duration. Either way, the threat becomes real once that plane is airborne." James could see Linda processing this information, weighing protocol against pragmatism. Around them, other TSA officers were following standard evacuation procedures, but Flight 447 was still boarding passengers, oblivious to the potential danger. "What are you recommending?" Linda asked. "Stop boarding immediately, evacuate the aircraft, and begin a systematic search. I can coordinate with the bomb squad when they arrive, but we need to start now. Every minute we wait is a minute closer to departure time." Linda made her decision. "Do it. I'll take responsibility with the supervisors." James immediately shifted into tactical command mode, drawing on training that had prepared him for exactly this scenario. His first priority was passenger safety, getting everyone off the aircraft and away from potential blast radius. His second priority was evidence preservation, conducting the search in a way that wouldn't compromise any device they might find. "Attention Flight 447 passengers and crew. came the announcement over the Gate PA system. Due to a security concern, we need all passengers to deplane immediately and return to the gate area. This is a precautionary measure. Please leave all personal items on board and exit the aircraft in an orderly fashion. As passengers began exiting the aircraft with confused and worried expressions, James approached the gate agent to gather critical information. In EOD operations, intelligence gathering was often more important than the actual bomb disposal. Understanding the threat, the target, and the likely methods could mean the difference between successful resolution and catastrophic failure. I need the passenger manifest, crew list, and baggage loading information for Flight 447, James told the gate agent. Also, any information about last-minute ticket purchases, standby passengers, or unusual baggage. The gate agent, a young woman named Sarah who looked overwhelmed by the situation, handed him the documents. "Is there really a bomb on the plane?" "That's what we're trying to find out," James replied. "Has anything unusual happened with this flight? Any passengers acting strangely? Any problems with baggage loading? Any maintenance issues?" Sarah thought for a moment. "There was one passenger who seemed really nervous during boarding. Middle-aged guy, kept checking his watch and looking around. But that could be normal flying anxiety." James nodded, making mental notes. In Iraq and Afghanistan, he'd learned that human intelligence was often more valuable than technical detection equipment. People behaved differently when they were involved in explosive plots, and those behavioral indicators could provide crucial clues. By 3:10 p.m., Flight 447 had been completely evacuated and the immediate gate area secured. The bomb squad was still 15 minutes out, but James knew that time was critical. If the device was real and the caller was telling the truth, they needed to begin searching immediately. "Linda, I'm going to start a preliminary search of the aircraft," James announced. "I'll focus on high-probability locations based on typical IED placement patterns." "James, shouldn't we wait for the bomb squad?" "The bomb squad will do the detailed technical work, but I can conduct an initial assessment to determine if we're dealing with a real threat or a hoax. In EOD, we call it threat confirmation, verifying that there's actually a device before committing full resources." James approached the aircraft with the same systematic methodology he'd used in combat zones. Visual inspection first, looking for anything that appeared out of place or recently disturbed. Electronic detection second, using portable equipment to identify potential explosive signatures. Physical search third, but only after confirming the presence of an actual device. The Boeing 737 had 180 seats across 30 rows, plus cargo holds, lavatories, and service areas. In military EOD operations, James had learned that terrorist devices were typically placed in locations that maximize damage while minimizing detection risk. On an aircraft, that meant either passenger areas with easy access or critical systems that would ensure catastrophic failure. He began with the passenger cabin, moving methodically through each row and checking under seats, in seat-back pockets, and around overhead compartments. His trained eye looked for anything that didn't belong: wires, unusual packages, recently disturbed areas, or signs of tampering. Row by row, James conducted the kind of systematic search that had once saved his unit from roadside bombs in Fallujah. Visual inspection followed by careful physical examination, always watching for booby traps or secondary devices designed to kill bomb disposal personnel. It was in row 17, seat C, that he found it. Taped underneath the seat, barely visible unless you were specifically looking for it, was a device that made James's blood run cold. It wasn't sophisticated, basic components, readily available materials, timer mechanism, but it was real, and it was live. James immediately backed away from the device and keyed his radio. "This is James at Gate B12. I have confirmed explosive device on Flight 447, row 17, Seat C. Device appears active with timer mechanism. I need immediate bomb squad response and full area evacuation. The response was immediate and professional. Copy that, James. Bomb squad is 2 minutes out. What's your assessment of the device? James studied the bomb from a safe distance, using the threat assessment skills he'd developed during years of handling enemy explosives. Timer-based, probably set for typical flight duration, designed to detonate at cruising altitude when maximum damage would be assured. The construction suggested someone with basic knowledge, but not professional training. Device appears to be timer-based, consistent with caller's statement about cruising altitude detonation. Construction is amateur but functional. I recommend immediate area expansion and preparation for controlled disposal. The bomb squad arrived at 3:20 p.m., just as Flight 447 had been scheduled to begin its taxi to the runway. James briefed the team leader, Sergeant Rodriguez, on his findings and assessment. "You did good work here," Rodriguez told James after examining the device. "This thing was real, it was live, and it would have gone off exactly when the caller said it would." "How'd you know to start searching before we arrived?" "Army EOD," James replied. "I've seen devices like this before." "No kidding? What unit?" 89th EOD Company, mostly Iraq and Afghanistan deployments. Rodriguez nodded with obvious respect. "Well, your training just saved 180 lives. We'll take it from here, but I want you to know, you handled this exactly right." As the bomb squad began their careful work to disarm and remove the device, James found himself surrounded by airport officials, FBI agents, and supervisors who suddenly saw their quiet TSA officer in an entirely different light. "James," said Airport Security Director Thompson, "I had no idea about your military background. Why didn't you ever mention your EOD experience?" James shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "It wasn't relevant to the job. I was hired to do airport security, not bomb disposal." "But it became relevant today," Thompson replied. "Your quick thinking and expertise may have prevented a major terrorist attack. That device would have brought down Flight 447 with everyone on board." The FBI agent conducting the initial investigation approached James with obvious interest. "Officer Mitchell, I need to get a full statement from you about how you handled this situation. Your actions may have provided critical intelligence for our investigation." Over the next several hours, James found himself at the center of an investigation that would eventually lead to the arrest of 3 domestic terrorists who had planned the attack. His quick recognition of the threat, systematic search methodology, and proper handling of the explosive device had not only saved lives but preserved evidence that proved crucial to the prosecution. But for James, the most important moment came 3 days later, when he received a call from Captain Jennifer Walsh, the pilot of Flight 447. "Officer Mitchell, I wanted to personally thank you for saving my crew and passengers. I've been flying for 15 years, and I've never been closer to losing an aircraft and everyone on board. What you did, there's no adequate way to express our gratitude." James was quiet for a moment. "Ma'am, I just did what I was trained to do. I'm glad everyone made it home safely." "Well, your training saved 180 lives. I hope you know that." 6 months later, James Mitchell was still working at Denver International Airport, but his role had expanded significantly. He'd been promoted to Senior Security Specialist and had begun training other TSA officers in advanced threat recognition and explosive device awareness. His military EOD experience, once a private part of his background, had become a valuable resource for airport security operations. The attempted bombing of Flight 447 had also led to enhanced security protocols and closer coordination between TSA personnel and military explosive experts. James found himself consulting on cases across the region, sharing expertise that bridged the gap between military and civilian security operations. More importantly to James, he discovered that his military service didn't have to be something he left behind. It could be something he built upon. The skills he'd learned as an EOD specialist weren't just useful for combat operations. They were valuable tools for protecting civilians in any environment where explosive threats existed. Flight 447 now flew its Chicago route every day, carrying passengers who had no idea how close they'd come to disaster. But James knew, and so did the crew, and so did the families who got to welcome their loved ones home instead of planning funerals. The 3 terrorists responsible for the plot were eventually sentenced to life in prison, their plan thwarted by the quick thinking of a TSA officer who happened to be one of the Army's most experienced bomb disposal experts. James Mitchell, Army EOD specialist, TSA officer, lifesaver, teacher, silent guardian.